get started, as Tori said, and one quick note is I am experiencing some difficulty with my computer, and it's just too weird to even discuss, other than to say I'm resorting to wearing these earphones, and so I don't get real good audio feedback. So if you ask me a question, I kind of look with a real dumb look, not just a dumb look, but a real dumb look. It's because I'm having some audio issues, so you'll just have to repeat your question. But we'll take it. We'll see how things go. It was kind of funny when we had an opening and Adria said, hey, we're looking for a couple of substitute teachers, so to speak. And I said, yeah, I would jump in there because I've really been thinking about hibiscuses lately. And so I said, oh, I'll put this out there as a topic. And I think 2 out of the first 3 people who joined into the discussion tonight, they said, in fact, Roseanne Jones was saying she has lots of hibiscus in her yard, and another person said she really likes them too. And that's not too surprising because when I was doing some research on this, I ran across a statement that said that the hibiscuses are one of the most popular shrubs that are grown. And it kind of reminds me of a story that's attributed to Yogi Berra. And maybe you know or don't know who he is, but he was a catcher for the New York Yankees, a very good catcher. But then he had a great post-playoff career. He was an announcer, and he used to come up with these things, and he would say these things that didn't make sense at first, but they did when you thought about it. And one of his stories was when he was a player, some of his fellow teammates from the New York Yankees asked if he was going to go to this one restaurant called Delmonico's in New York. And Yogi Berra stopped and said, nah, nobody goes there anymore. It's too popular. And I think maybe hibiscuses are like that. Maybe people don't like to necessarily grow them because they're thought of being too popular, too common. But they actually are. You can actually have a lot of hibiscuses growing in a small area and not necessarily notice a repetition because they're very there's a very wide range of them. First of all, they're a member of the Malvaceae family, and I'm just tossing that out there just from some technical talk. And the Malvaceae family is comprised of about 240 or so genera, which is, genuses, and there's about 4,200 or so species in this family. And you doesn't get a lot of notice, but there's some interesting species that are actually within this family. For example, the cotton plants are in the family. Cocoa plants are in the family. It's just an example of how broad this is. Linden trees, which are really pretty little trees, are in the family. Durian, which is if you've ever been over into the Far East, that's a pretty interesting fruit that's grown. That's in there, as is okra. So that's quite the wide-ranging family in there. And I think the hibiscus genus is one of the major contributors of that family, but still, I just toss that out there to show that somehow these bad boys are all related. And the Malvaceae family primarily grown for their flowers, but the thing that's interesting too is that they say that members of this family are primarily tropical or subtropical plants, yet you're going to see that like at least one of these species I'm going to talk about today grows as far north as Newfoundland. So, I mean, that's a pretty wide range for a family of plants that don't like cool weather. But in general, I would say about these hibiscuses that there really is something for everyone. And I'm going to talk about 3 specific species tonight, and that's primarily to show the range of what your options are when you're talking about hibiscuses. The first one is Hibiscus mosquetos, commonly named common rose mallow, swamp rose mallow, things like that. I've got 2 pictures on the screen. The red one is one of the more popular varieties of it, so to speak. That's called Lord Baltimore. There's another plant called Lady Baltimore. This is a very common, and maybe it was overused, but this guy, as you can see, is red. It's about 10-inch flowers. Lady Baltimore is a little bit more demure. She's pink flowers, about 8 inches. They grow to be about 4 feet tall. And then the next guy on the right is called part of the Disco Bell series. That one's called White Form. These are actually pretty small plants. So the Disco Bells stay about 2 feet tall or so. By the way, one thing, what makes the hibiscus, what they all have in common is if you look in the middle there, there's like a little horn that comes out. That's called, of all things, a stameno column of stamens or stamen. And so that's what the bees are going after, hummingbirds and other critters that go for it. Now, Hibiscus mushutos, this is a perennial. And in fact, it's described as a woody-based perennial because they get pretty tall. So they have to have pretty good support. So as the stems grow up throughout the summer, they get pretty robust. But believe it or not, at the end of the year, they're dead, and you cut them back to the ground. And if you've never grown these, or the first time you've grown, you got them in the ground, you bring them home from the garden center, you put them in the ground, you enjoy them all season long, they die down. And then you think to yourself the next spring, these things are not going to grow that big in one season. Well, yeah, they actually do this. They put out all their growth in one season because they are a perennial. And they break dormancy maybe a little bit late. But once they get going, they just shoot up. And then pretty much from early summer into fall, you're going to have flowers. Real common to hibiscuses, you'll hear this over and over again. The flowers don't last so long, but they make up for it by blooming very prolifically. So, and they just keep on coming as the summer goes along. As I said before, hummingbirds and butterflies like them. There's really no reason once they start to die. Some perennials, they say it's good to keep over winter because they're, different birds might like the seeds or stuff like that. There's no reason to keep these things. Once they go, they're just they're not pleasant looking, so just get rid of them. And some of the things that they are subjected to is leaf spot, blight, rust, canker, but especially Japanese beetles, especially early in the summer. You'll see a lot of Japanese beetles, so you do want to watch out for those, but they make themselves known pretty readily, so it's not that hard to monitor for them. This next guy, first of all, this mushatos follows pretty much along. Most hibiscuses are kind of like in the white, pink, a little bit of red, or maybe blue. But when you get to this next guy, Hibiscus rosa sinensis, these are the Chinese or Hawaiian hibiscuses. These are, I will say this pretty confidently, these are the showiest of the hibiscuses. This first one on the left is called double Rhonda D, and you can see it's actually a double flower. The next guy over is called Quasar, and that's a single flower, just one set of petals that wrap around that cone-like structure. And if you want to get some real pizzazz and real pop in your yard or somewhere on your back deck in a pot or something, go for these Hibiscus rosa sinensis. Those are the most vivid of the flowers, and they're a tropical plant, as you can kind of tell from the name. When something says Hawaiian hibiscus, it's probably has some tropical growth to it, and that's the case with this particular species. They can get to be 3 to 12 feet tall, but not up here. But if you're down like in Florida or maybe South Carolina, you might get them to grow there, parts of southern Texas, that area like that. I think they're only good through like zone 9 or something like that in the wild. One of the things that's interesting, I didn't realize until fairly recently, these things bloom on new wood. So throughout the summer, if you pinch the tip slightly to generate new growth, you'll get more flowers. But if you prune them too severely, you don't just go in there and whack the heck out of them. if you cut off too many of the flower buds, you won't have any flowers for a while. And one of the things that people say, you know, up here, we grow plants and we grow them as annuals but they're not really annuals. They're really tender perennials. And this is really a tender perennial. But let me tell you, if you put this in the ground and leave it in the ground, you could kind of think of it as an annual because it will be dead before springtime rolls around. It prefers rich, well-drained soil, and soggy conditions will lead to problems. I personally like to grow these in pots because then at the end of the season, you can take them in. The literature says that the minimum temperature for these things to survive is about maybe 50 or 55 degrees, like over the winter time. But I keep them in a shop that basically goes down to 42 to 44 degrees, and they go dormant. They're very dormant, but they've always come back for me. And so by about St. Patrick's Day, I'm giving them some fertilizer, a little bit of water, and as the days get longer and a little bit warmer, I bring them out. And if I get lucky, if you have a warm spring, I can get blooms on them by Memorial Day. This year with the cool spring, I was a little bit later than that, but they did come back, and they're on my front porch. One of them is on my front porch, the one that I grow and I overwinter, and it just came back fine and dandy. But here's one of the strange things. These are tropical plants, but if the temperature gets too warm, say above 85 or 88 degrees, 88 or something like that, they stop flowering. So you think, what's that? You know, you would think a tropical plant would just thrive in, you know, warmer weather, 90, 95, but they don't like it too warm there. So I guess maybe they're a little bit moody, but they seem to work pretty well overall. They say that bacterial leaf spot is an issue. I haven't had that, and I've been growing them for on and off for like 15 years in pots. But aphids can be a problem. Now, if you're going to bring them into your house, like at the end of the summertime, what you want to be careful about is you really want to get them really cleaned up, really good with some insect soap, or give them some good blasts of water, especially underneath, to dislodge anything. Because once you bring them in your house, especially if you have like a regular heating system, a furnace, and you bring them into dry conditions, the flies and the aphids just go nuts on you. And so you're best to try to get them cleaned off really well before you bring them in. Incidentally, I bring them into my workshop, and it's not particularly warm in there. I have a heater that I use just to keep the temperature above freezing as the cold weather comes on. And I haven't had any problems with that. But when I used to bring them into one of my other houses, they would just go, the bugs would just go wild if I didn't clean them off well. So I'd say if you happen to have something like a sunny laundry room or something like that, you'd probably have pretty good luck. But just in general, or treat them like, you know, with African violets, where you put them on a tray with some pebbles or something with water to keep some moisture around there. You might be okay. But my opinion, they're probably, if you have a variety that you like, it's worth trying to overwinter them, because I've had good luck with them. And as I said, even exposed to colder weather than that literature says they're supposed to take, they come back pretty reliably. So you might give it a shot. And the final one is Hibiscus syriacus. And this is a very common plant. The pictured one, I call a bluebird, but I think Roseanne Jones had a different name for it. There's a kind of like a French name for that. What is that, Roseanne?
Mine is the cordon bleu.
Does it look like that? Do I have that right?
Pardon?
Is that the one that you grow, the picture on the left?
Mine is cordon bleu, but it's not a rose of Sharon.
I'm sorry, you say it isn't Rosa Sharon?
No.
Hmm. Well, okay. Well, that one's Bluebell, and then the one on the right is called Diana, and I have that one pictured for a specific reason. I'll get to in just a minute. So the last one, or the first one we looked at, the Hibiscus mosquitoes, that's a perennial. And if you go to like Merrifield, for example, you're gonna go to the perennial section to buy that plant. This one here, Hibiscus syriacus, is actually a shrub. Some people would call them a small tree, but I think of them as a shrub. They're multi-stemmed, about 8 to 12 feet tall, and you really don't have to do much to them. With the exception of certain hibiscuses that are actually, they have like a maroonish foliage, one thing that hibiscuses pretty much have in common is that the fall foliage in general isn't anything spectacular. I mean, it's pretty enough. It's a green, nice shape, little toothed edges. But in the fall, you know, you're not going to see anything like with these shrubs. You're not going to see anything other than that, some quick fading to yellow, and then the leaves are gone. But again, they make up for them because the flowers are so pretty, and they're so they just bloom continuously throughout the whole summer. They can be in sun, or they can take some light shade. They can take most types of soil. To tell you the truth, I hardly water mine, and they seem to be fine and dandy throughout most summers. So that's pretty good. And one of the things I've noticed on my rows of Sharons, and this is just kind of like, I won't say it's like not, it's uncommon, but it's really noticeable for whatever reason. Where I happen to be growing them is in semi-shade. And just because of the nature of how the trees are situated, these flowers, these shrubs get more sun in the morning than they do in the afternoon. The sun goes east to west, and they happen to be there. All 5 of the plants that I have, all 5 of the shrubs, noticeably lean towards the sunnier side. And I know that's not too surprising, but I have a lot of other trees and shrubs that kind of grow in that same area and along the same axis. And I cannot say that I notice that these things lean more heavily towards the sun than any of the other small shrubs, similarly sized shrubs. So I don't know if that's just a coincidence. Maybe I planted them crooked or something like that. But that's just one of the things I happen to notice in the last year or two. One of the things you can do for these to encourage more flowers is either in the fall, or I prefer to do in the spring, is you can shear these back considerably right when the leaves start to come out. Right about that time you're seeing leaves develop. You cut them back so that there's a few buds on a branch. You cut them right back just a little bit above a bud. And that increases the branching, and that gives you more flowers. So if you have these things, you might give that a shot. One of the things that people don't like about this particular shrub, especially the species, is that, to put it kindly, they reseed pretty readily. And so that means you're constantly pulling up, either giving them away or throwing them away, the little seedlings as they come up. But a lot of the more common, the more recent cultivars don't really reseed that much. Like that plant that's on the right-hand side, that Diana there, that's part of what they call the Greek goddess line. They were developed at the National Arboretum, and they're a blend of several kinds of hibiscuses. But the nice thing about them is they retain their flowering, but it's really funny. The literature says they're sterile, but they say so they don't seed as much. But I would have thought if they were sterile, they wouldn't seed. All I can say for sure is that they reseed very, very little. I've had mine in the ground for like 13 years. And I've hardly ever had to pull up any, unwanted plants. So if you like the idea of growing these, but you don't like the prospect of having, seedlings coming up all the time, go for something in that Greek goddess, or just see online. If you go online and you pull up Hibiscus syriacus or Rose of Sharon, seedless, I'm sure you'd come up with a wide variety of colors and combinations to go for that would give you the flowers you like, but not the seeds. So that's my presentation. I tried to keep it short and sweet. Oops, a little bit longer than I thought, but I'll try to answer any questions. If I can't answer them, maybe somebody else can chime in with some thoughts.
Jim, this is Debbie Lasky. A great presentation. I love hibiscus. I was the one who said that I love hibiscus. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Quick question, and this is from a neighbor of mine who couldn't come, but she wanted me to ask these questions. Have you ever tried to grow the mallow version of hibiscus from seed?
I have not.
Okay, and so the hibiscus that you are showing are the ones that do the best in Virginia, right? In the Virginia area?
Well, they do very well in the Virginia area. I called these three up because one of them was a tropical. Sinensis is a tropical. Muscheros is an example of a perennial. Somebody before we started, and then this one here is a shrub, and I was just doing that to show the wide range of growth patterns. Somebody mentioned a star hibiscus earlier, and that I believe is something like Hibiscus cochineus or something like that. It's also called like a Texas hibiscus. And unlike these, I almost put a picture of that on there and the presentation. Unlike these ones, and almost all the other hibiscuses where the petals kind of like overlap each other, the star hibiscus has like 5 petals and they're distinct apart from each other. And so
what color is that? Red?
They can be red. I've grown red ones. I've grown pink ones. I had a white one. And they also grow much taller than moscheros. I mean, these things would go from like nothing in the ground to being like 9 feet tall. I mean, it was like Jack and the Beanstalk, only with flowers.
Wow.
It was just like, it was crazy as all hell. And the thing is that they were growing in a pretty damp area. And that's the same thing with moscheros and cochineus, I believe it is. It's some pronunciation like that. If you looked in a book, you would see it. You would be able to recognize that from my mispronunciation. But they were in a spot that stayed wet throughout the winter. And unlike a lot of other plants that can have problems, these things loved it. And in the summertime, when I'd water and the water would kind of form in this like a natural low-lying area, they seem to like that water a lot. But the short answer to your question is I picked these 3 because of the wide range, but that star hibiscus is pretty cool. But
I think I've seen that. And my last question is, I have seen what looks like hibiscus in parks, like near the water's edge.
Yep.
Like I'm trying to think of that one park that's down in Alexandria, like kind of swampy area, and they tend to be white with the red throat. And I think that's called it's a wildflower called mallow, swamp mallow.
That's the same thing.
Okay.
I'm real certain. I'm very, very certain it's a hibiscus. Look for that horn, this thing, the stamen thing. If that's on there, that's probably a hibiscus. You know, like they say, these common names, they all have different, different parts of the country, or different people might call a plant a different thing. But that's why I threw that the formal name up on top, just because that's what that is. Like over here, the
like that,
moscheros.
Yeah, like that white one in the right. That looks like, I mean, we have a lake house, and I see that on the bank of the lake of the water a lot. I mean, I've seen that.
Yeah.
It's wild.
And the thing is about that one, again, it's a perennial. You're seeing it now, but come November or so, it's just going to be like a ugly stalk, because if nobody's taking care of it, which will eventually fall off during the wintertime. But you see, that's a swamp rose mallow, common rose mallow. So the mallow, M-A-L-L-O-W, is in the name. So that's just what people call it, maybe.
Thank you very much.
boy, I do like these Hawaiian hibiscuses. They're so crazy looking.
Yes, very beautiful.
Any other questions I can try to answer?
I was going to say, Deborah, you can grow, this is Roseanne, and you can grow the star hibiscus from seed. I've been very successful in that, and even given seeds away. So if you ever want any, just let me know.
Yes, I would.
Because Roseanne, you know, I'll tell you, I mean, how easy are these things to grow? I mean, the Syriacus, if you don't pay attention, you're going to come back after you've had this in the ground for a few years, and you're going to have probably 20. They grew themselves from seeds.
Right.
So of course you can grow them from seeds. I've just never tried it specifically, especially with the perennials. I'm not sure about that, but the Syriacus, I mean, that's one of the problems that people don't like, is that they seed and seed and seed.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Roseanne, with that star, can you give me some pointers on when you planted and that type of thing, or?
I've had seedlings that I started growing from, you know, that seeded off the plant I have, and just put them out in the, they've got part sun, part shade, and they do great.
Yeah.
They have, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't start them in November or anything like that, but I think if you have the seeds, it's springtime, summer, just get them in the ground so that they get a good head start. And, you know, probably you won't see much in the first year, but by the second or so, you'll be rolling in the flowers.
Sounds good.
Yep, they're really pretty and unusual. In fact, when we first moved in our house, my neighbor had them. And a funny story, my husband came in and said, I think our neighbor is growing marijuana. And he was an older gentleman. And I said, I don't think so. He says, look at those plants out in front. And the reason why is because the leaves of the star hibiscus are similar to the leaves of the marijuana plant. But obviously, it's not the same. But so we call it our pseudo marijuana plant.
That's funny.
So definitely, you know, keep in touch with me, and I'll gladly get you some seeds or seedlings or whatever you want.
Great. I will try it.
Yeah, these things grow amazingly. We have an area in the yard where all the water seems to gather, and so you know, it's like swamp plants. So what do? We went to a nursery, bought a couple of these things last year, cut them way back so they were about an inch high, and just lost track of them because we mulched over, and I just happened to step on one day. I thought, oh, that's right, we put these plants in here, scraped some of the mulch away, and they grew in the late spring to be 5 feet tall with these magnificent blossoms. So it's really an amazing. It's really an amazing.
So did you have the perennial variety? Is that what you grew? The perennial one, the first one I talked about?
Yeah, I believe so, because they're sort of woody on the bottom, and then they grow 5 feet tall.
Yeah. But first time you see it, it's just amazing. I mean, I know other plants put on that kind of growth, but not only do these put on the growth, but then they start to flower relatively early in the season too. It's not like some of the plants that you have to wait till like August or something like that. I mean, once they break dormancy, they don't waste any time. It's a pretty impressive plant.
Yeah, I also saw a beautiful rose of Sharon blossom, just a single one, walking through the woods with my dog. I thought, geez, what is that? I took a picture of it, and took on the app, picture this, and it says Rose of Sharon, but it looks very much like your white background with the very red center.
Mm-hmm.
One blossom, of course, next day it was gone.
Yeah, but so you're in the woods, and so they don't flower that much because it's in the shade. They really.
Yeah, no, this was one blossom. That's all there was.
Yeah, they definitely prefer lots of sun
Beautiful.
for maximum blooms.
Sorry, I was late, so I missed the first part of your presentation, but these Chinese or Hawaiian hibiscus, are those perennials?
The Hawaiian hibiscus,
Yeah,
the one that's on the screen now.
yeah, that one that's now.
Yeah, they're better than perennials. They're actually well, they're a tender perennial. And if you were to grow this in your house, they would stay green and in flower year round if you had them in the right place in the window. It's just that if you grow them outside, if you stick them in the ground, they're going to die over wintertime because they just can't take the cold winters here. So you can either, like I grow mine in a pot, and then I just take the pot into a sheltered shop in the wintertime, and it kind of goes real dormant, like there aren't many leaves left on it by the end of the wintertime. But once I start bringing it back to life, come around St. Patrick's Day, put it out late April. Once the temperatures are going to be like not much below 40 some degrees, maybe 48, 50 degrees at nighttime. Once they get out there, it just comes right back alive, and you just see, just like leaves start forming and nothing flat. And as I say, even with that mistreatment, on a good year, I can have flowers by Memorial Day. This year it was a couple weeks into June before I got the first flower, but they've been in constant flower ever since then. It's just a real pretty one. It's yellow with like a deep maroon center. It's a pretty real pretty flower.
Thank you. Yeah, they are beautiful.
And that's what you see these, not these two varieties necessarily, but when you go to like your big box stores, like in like early May or something like that, that's what they brought up from the Carolinas. That's the variety that they have in there. And a lot of people don't realize that. And that's different than this guy here. They're similar, that this is a perennial, this is a perennial, but this is a tropical perennial. And the price you pay for the real good colors, or the really crazy colors, is that it won't survive the winter. So, just depending on how you like to budget your money and how you grow your plants, if you get something and you get like one spectacular year out of it, and it's not that expensive, and some people it's worth it. I usually put mine in a pot, and I'll get about 3 or 4 good years, and then it just gets too root bound. And I haven't mastered the art. I haven't tried real hard, admittedly, but you would have to go in there, take the plant out, cut the roots back a little bit, trim the top somewhat too, and you could probably grow it indefinitely, or just keep putting in a larger and larger pots. But I've already got mine in a pretty good sized pot that if I go too many more sizes up, I won't be able to carry it in and out of the shop at the beginning, end of the year. So I just grow them for a few years, 3 or 4 years. And when they start to decrease in production, because what's happening is that the roots are kind of like weaving themselves into a basket, into the shape of the pot. Once that happens, by and large, I just go find another real cool one, because they're always coming up with new varieties of these things. Put that in the pot and just enjoy that for a few years. So, by the way, these ones, especially the tropical ones, and if you're growing them in a pot, I think even more so, they do like to be, I give them a bloom booster about every other week, and they are heavy feeders, and the perennial one is also a pretty heavy feeder. The Rose of Sharon, the Syriacus, the one that's like a shrub, I don't do much anything to it. It just blooms nonstop. Then the other thing that's about these things is that some people say that they're so delicate, it's like a tissue paper. But the bad side is after rain, it's kind of like a soggy tissue paper. Not necessarily. So the flowers sometimes don't look so good after a good heavy rain, but since they don't last that long anyway, and they're constantly reflowering, it's like it's no big deal.
Any more questions?